Hi boys and girls, so today we are talking about value, and value is how light or dark something is, and we can use values for a variety of things in art. It's super important if you want to make things look more realistic, or you want to add form to your drawings or texture. You can use it for a bunch of different things. So here are, I'd say, 4 of the most common techniques of how to create a value scale. A value scale is a range from darkest to lightest and all of those shades in between. So we're going to practice different techniques on how to do that. So first thing is your name. Okay, so we're using a pencil today. You can put your teacher's name if you'd like. Okay. So we're going to skip blending for a second and we're going to go down to hatching. Hatching is the technique that you do tiny little lines in one direction. I usually do them on a diagonal. It's just easier because that's the way your hand moves. Because if you're doing up and down or side to side, your hand doesn't naturally move that way. You're moving your whole hand. Where this way, if I'm doing a diagonal, my hand can just kind of flick. That's how I personally do it, and there's a lot of artists that do it that way. So when you want the darkest value, you're going to push down harder, and you're going to have your lines closer together. So let me show you what I mean by that. Okay, so I'm pushing down harder, and my lines are really close together. So you notice I'm just doing short strokes down. You can layer if you need to, but you get the gist of the more you push down, the darker your pencil color is. Now, as you get lighter, you can space them out more and you don't have to press as hard. So I'm going to lighten, but I'm going to still keep them pretty close together. I'm not pressing as hard on my paper. So you can see that this one's significantly lighter. Now that might almost be too light because you kind of want to match the color above it. Now you can't get that perfect black color because you're using a pencil. Your pencil doesn't get black, okay? So I might need to do a second layer. You can always layer, you can't always take away. Okay, that's a little better. So even lighter now. I'm going to keep my lines still nice and close together, but my pencil pressure is not as hard. Cool. And then keep going. And you can kind of start to space out your lines now. It's going to make it appear lighter. And going. Now if you get to the end and you're like, I can't possibly get any lighter, you can kind of go back and make those lines. You can do more layers. See, now I made this one a little too dark. So I'm going to go back and make this one a little darker. Now you might use hatching if you need to shade something quickly. Hatching is used to shade quickly. And then your last box should be white. Now, for cross hatching, it's very similar to hatching, but what you're going to do is do essentially little tiny X's. So like we did with hatching where we're at a diagonal, you're going to go one way, but to create that darker value, you're going to actually turn your hand and make the X's. So now that's going to create almost like, it almost looks like a woven piece of fabric. So again, lighter pressure, spaced out a little more. It's going to make your value lighter. So I'm going to lighter pressure, space them out more until eventually I'm at the end. Now this is really hard for you to see just because of the camera, but I'm sorry about that. Not much I can do about that though. Those look pretty similar, so I can kind of make this one a little darker. Now stippling, we don't need to practice too much because otherwise we will be here all day. You can use a marker for this technique just because it's a little easier, but if you want to do your pencil, essentially stippling is just a series of dots. So I will show you with my marker just because it's way easier with a marker, but stippling is a bunch of dots. Now I'm not like jabbing my paper, I'm just doing little dots. Now there's a whole bunch of artists that solely only create artworks using stippling, which is it's kind of a difficult technique, I think, because you have to create all different values. So the closer your dots are together, the darker it's going to look. If you layer them, now this could take you a while if you I can speed up through this one, but essentially the same thing, farther apart until you're in a white square. When we're done with stippling, we're going to go back up and do my favorite one, which is blending. Now, with blending, you're going to do something similar to hatching, but you don't want to be able to see those tiny little strokes. Blending is when you have a lot of time to shade. So a lot of artists might use it to look super realistic. That's what you're going to use if you want a more realistic drawing. If you're doing something quick, like a quick sketch, you're going to use maybe more so these techniques, but blending is when you really have time. Now, there's special tools that you can use to help you blend, but we don't necessarily need them because you can use your finger. That's what I love to do. So, what you're going to do is kind of start off like you would with hatching, but you don't want to create those little tiny lines. I'm just like basically coloring it in like I would with like a colored pencil or a crayon. And remember, it's the darkest one here, so I'm going to try and fill in all my white spaces. I'm going to press down a little bit harder. Remember, you can layer as well, so you don't need to like press down super duper hard. You can do one layer at a time and then go back over everything. You can start even coloring the opposite direction to help fill in those white spaces. Now, here's the fun part. Once you get it all filled in and all your gaps are filled, you take your finger and you're going to smudge. Now, smudging just means you push around the graphite and you're going to get a messy finger, but that's okay. And you fill it in. Now it fills in all those white spots. Now I use this a lot. So that's still not dark enough, so I'm going to create another layer. Kind of went outside my box a little, which is fine. Smudge again. Now that's going to be your darkest value. So you're going to do that again until you get lighter. So you want to lighten your hand when you're coloring. Remember, you can always make it darker. And use your finger to smudge. Make it a little darker. Layers, 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 my friends. You don't want to be able to see your pencil marks. If you do, I mean you're practicing, so you can kind of color in a different direction to help get rid of those. And smudge. And you're going to have messy fingers, so I would suggest just using one finger. This one's more so about changing the pressure of your pencil. You can kind of try to match the color above. As you go lighter, it kind of gets a little harder. Because I'm like barely using my pencil. And there you go.